I am your host, Carrie, giving us different perspectives on where we are and where we want to go on our journey. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to spending some time with you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FoundHer series. I am your host, Carrie. I have another amazing guest on this week. Happy New Year to everybody. Feels like I haven't been in here for a little bit. I would love to introduce you to Sandra Odgers. She is an investment advisor, wealth, financial planner, and I wanted to have a conversation because I think it's a really important topic that not a lot of us talk about or are comfortable talking about. So I'm bringing Sandra in here to help us dive in, give us some tips, some tools, and just have a really good conversation to put some of us at ease. So Sandra, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled to have you. Thrilled.
Carrie, I am absolutely thrilled to be here, and it really is an honor. This is such an important podcast series that you do, and to be able to be a part of that, I'm just so grateful. And the topic of empowering women around financial literacy and investments and making sense out of that whole mess. For some people, it feels pretty overwhelming. So if I can be a small piece in helping make that easier for people, that's an honor. So thank you for the invitation.
You are so welcome. I'm going to just go back a little bit to tell you some of the reasons, or tell our audience some of the reasons that I really connected with you. I feel like you are somebody who can really make a difference and an impact in the world, really, honestly, with what you're sharing. Women especially, I know that you deal with men as well, of course, and couples and the whole range. But there's a couple of the things that I noticed that were written on your website, I just so resonated with. So I'm going to go over a couple of those just so people know. You consciously asking yourself what you can do to improve the client experience. Okay, so I love that. You're it's not just coming from your head, it's coming from your heart. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so connected with you. Another thing that you wrote about was that you're tapping into your imagination. I'm like, these words are just like, this is my person. I love the language that you're using because I resonate so well with it. And then using your insight and your knowledge to enrich the lives of your clients. And I just, there was something about that wording that you used and what you bring, the sense of humor that you bring to a very tough subject for a lot of people. I think it's a place where people are very vulnerable when you're talking about your finances and where you're at, where you want to be. And I think you would be somebody that just, because of who you are, you bring a sense of ease to that and a sense of, you know what, it's going to be okay. We're going to work on this together. Them stepping in is the first step, right? To opening the conversation.
Absolutely, Carrie. And thank you for those very kind words and for actually reading my website. That's amazing. You write those things and you wonder if anybody ever looks at it. So words are important to me. In fact, I sometimes think it sounds a little corny, but there's 3 specific words that I use to describe my practice. And I think it's not just about my practice that we're talking about today. It's really about for your listeners as they're working with their advisors or looking for an advisor. The words that I think are really important, that are my doctrine when I come to work every single day, there's 3 words. The first one is clarity. So it's helping my clients form a sense of clarity, a better, clear picture of where they're at and where they want to get to. Sounds simple, not always so simple in people's minds. So clarity is one of the pieces. Insight, as you mentioned, that is bringing my insight, my experience. Now, this is my 29th year in the industry. So, I've picked up a few things over those years and with hundreds, literally hundreds, if not thousands of different clients in different situations. So I can bring those insights, of course, as well as my formal education and training in this area, to help people to make some sense of things. And then the third word that I use is partnership, because I think that's really important. And I first of all consider that I work in partnership with my clients. We're on the same side of the table. I'm with them trying to get them to their goals. But it's also working in partnership with the other people that are important in their lives as far as advisors. I work with their tax advisors. I work with their legal advisors. So it's all part of a team behind the client working all in the same direction. And that I'm not doing something over here on the investment side that may be conflicting or contrary to what their tax advisor is doing on the tax planning, or their lawyer is doing on the estate planning side. So it's so important to work in partnership. So again, those are the three words, and words I believe do carry a lot. They should carry a lot of meaning.
Yeah, I
don't just throw them around. I really do believe this right to my core and carry it with me every single day. So
and it's like you're a piece of the puzzle then, right?
Absolutely.
You're a piece of their puzzle, and you're bringing in, it's
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely. And oftentimes we'll think of ourselves, those of us in my role, sort of like a quarterback, where you may be calling the play, but you are not the whole team on the field. I don't know why I'm using a football analogy, aside from I watched a lot of football on the weekend with my son, so maybe it's top of mind, but it really is one of those central figures, but it takes a team really to execute. So
I love that. Are you, so can you give me a little bit of background of what actually brought you to where you are now? And what are some of the experiences that you've had that makes you really feel that you can connect with some of your clients, because you know where they've been, kind of thing, right? Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
I've lived it on a personal level, so I can maybe relate to some of the things and expose some of the hidden pitfalls that I can help my clients to avoid because I've been through it, or also because of my training.
Right.
So as I mentioned, this is my 29th year. I started way back. I was in my early 20s. And honestly, even though as a kid, my dad, I remember when I got one of my first high school jobs, he started talking to me about RRSPs in the 80s. And I remember looking at him thinking, what the heck are you talking about? I think I was 16 or 17 and I was working at a dentist's office getting my first paycheck, and he's talking about RSPs. And I thought, it has nothing to do with me, but I will give him credit that it did spark some interest in what is that, even though it wasn't super relevant to me at the time. That carried forward. Years later, also, by the way, I should say my dad takes full credit for my career, I think, at this point. I'll give him some of the credit. But years later, my background was in marketing and event planning, and I was planning events for an investment firm. And separate, I was working for a hotel and I was planning their events, and I didn't really know what they did. But they came along and they said, hey, would you like to come and work for us? Because we put on a lot of events. Why don't we have you in-house instead of just contract you out? I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I should actually learn what you do. And so that's how it really started with me taking my securities license. And this is in the early 90s, and got curious. I think that's probably the best advice to give to any kids, is to just stay curious and read and ask questions and shadow people and just be that little nag that follows people around and asks what they do and how they got to be where they are. But anyway, that's sort of how I started in the industry way back in the 90s. And it grew from there, where I started to take more courses, got interested in some financial planning. But what really catapulted my career or changed the trajectory somewhat was years later, about 14, 15 years ago, I found myself with my marriage breaking down, and I was going through a divorce. In fact, I wasn't certain it was going to end that way. It did end in divorce, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I had to really look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, if you're on your own, how are you going to do this? I had 2 kids, 4 and 7 at the time. I was going to be a single mom. At the time, my husband was making the lion's share of the family income. So it was partly how am I going to be financially independent, but just what does it all mean? Even though I was in the industry, there were a lot of gaps. And so I'll never forget one of the things I did is I went to my banker and I said, okay, if I end up on my own, how does that look? Where will I live with my children? How will I get a mortgage? What does that look like? And she did some work, and her name was Sandra as well. And she said, Sandra, I have some good news and I have some bad news. And I thought, oh dear. So I said, okay, well, what is it? And she says, well, the good news is you have no bad credit. I thought, okay, this is great.
Yeah.
The bad news is you have no credit. So here I was, quite embarrassed. Now I talk about it now, and I'm happy to share my personal story. But at the time, I remember feeling so ashamed, so embarrassed. Here I am in the industry and facing what was quite life-changing, and really, really ill-prepared for it. And I felt completely overwhelmed. So fast forward, that's about 15 years ago, but that really catapulted me to take some ownership and like I say, really look in the mirror. What skills do I need on a personal level? Now, the skills I gathered to help me personally have resonated. Now, fast forward, because you probably don't want a half an hour of me talking about my history, but 15 years or so later, here I have a practice where I focus, although like you say, I do have women and men and couples as clients, but the predominant clients that I work with are women. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think many things in life are coincidences. It is because I have not just this personal experience where I can relate to women going through, not that everybody has to have gone through a divorce to deal with me, but I can help people through making sense of something that maybe they feel some shame or anxiety or embarrassment around. And unfortunately, there's way too many women that are experiencing that. And so now I'm in a position where I can help.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I worked in the banking industry years and years ago in my 20s. And I remember people having conversations with me about that they hated to go into the bank. To go and ask for a loan felt like they were begging, to negotiate a mortgage rate. They were like, well, and I'm like, no, you need to negotiate those things. Like there's always room in there. And it was like, I felt like it was such an intimidating thing to do. Very overwhelming. And a lot of, like you said, they were embarrassed to come in because they thought they should know more. They should have more. They thought they should be further ahead. And it's just like, no, we need people to help us get there.
That's right.
So there's no shame in that. If anything, it's like, congratulate yourself that you're getting curious and asking for help. Asking for help is one of the hardest things that people do.
Absolutely. And no positive change comes in life by putting our head in the sand and thinking that something's just gonna, go away on its own.
That's what I used to do. I just wouldn't open my bills when I was single with no money. I'm just not going to open it, because if I open it, I need to see it. Right? That didn't help.
You may remember back in those days that when you did start to open those bills and look at them and create a plan of sorts of how to tackle them, how you felt. It's so uplifting. You breathe better, you sleep better, you feel a sense of accomplishment. But taking that first step is the hardest step toward the solution. 100%. And there's many steps in finding a solution, but the first one is the hardest.
The first one is acknowledging what you have.
Well, that's
just knowing that once you put the plan in place, it's not so overwhelming.
That's absolutely right.
That was the best thing that I could have done, was just lay it all out there. Where am I at? What do I need to do? And you know what? I need some help.
Absolutely. Just to touch on another point you made there, you talk about going into the bank or opening your statements at home. In my experience of when I am working with couples, and I'm trying to change this one client at a time. However, it still is predominantly men who make the financial decisions. Not always. I don't want to get a bunch of flack for this, but because there are exceptions, and it is changing. But historically, if we look to our parents' generation, and even in our own generation, unfortunately, sometimes when there's a couple, there will be the male or the husband or the partner who takes the lead in the big financial investment decisions or financial planning. In my own family, my dad did all the investing decisions and my mom paid the household bills. So it's not that she was uninvolved in finances, but found it quite intimidating to then be dealing with, okay, what's going to happen? My parents are both 87 now. Who knows who will be the first to pass away. But statistically, if it's my father, my mom has come to the realization, wait a minute, it's going to be me that's looking after this stuff. So thankfully, I'd like to think that I could take some credit for this, but I don't know that I can. But my mom has been joining him in meetings for many years now.
Yes.
And they talk about what they're going to discuss in the meeting, and they talk about the meeting after it's happened. So she had, and they ask me questions, thankfully, although that took a long time for them to accept that a youngest daughter could share information like that.
Help them.
Because a lot of families still think finances are not to be talked about at the dinner table.
Yes, very true.
I disagree.
Yeah, me too.
I talk to my kids a lot about financial literacy.
Well, and I think it's so important. And I think that's somewhere that we've I shouldn't say failed, but we could have done better. We absolutely could have done better in that, but it's never too late. And I think that's never too late. That I want to really get across today is it is never too late to start. Start where you're at. And you also talked about, when we are looking at getting some help with our finances or with our investments or whatever it is. I love that you bring up don't just go to the first one. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I sure can. So, when we are looking for an investment advisor or a financial planner, now I'm both, I'm a wealth advisor and financial planner. Not everybody is. There are independent financial planners and there are just independent investment advisors. When you seek help, and first of all, that's great. You get to the point where you're now ready to seek help and talk to somebody to see if they can help you navigate your future decisions. That's great. My way of thinking of it is, think of it like you're dating, which sounds very strange. You're not really trying to date your investment advisor. However, when you are selecting, because your investment advisor, this is not just somebody you're going to deal with once in a while necessarily. At minimum, you're going to be doing check-ins annually. With many of my clients, it's quarterly that we sit down and we do reviews. Annually, we will update their financial plan, but quarterly or semi-annually, we're absolutely going into the weeds and looking at their investments. So we're in a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Ideally, right? Yeah. So when we think about a relationship, I apply the same rules that I would to a personal relationship, in which, and if we think about dating, because I think that's sort of a weird way to think of it, but anytime I can glean humor out of these things, I do. But if you're dating, you don't go on a date and think you're going to marry that person. You might go through and you date a few people and you find somebody who is a good fit. And there's a number of different boxes that need to be checked. Now, obviously, when you're looking for, I shouldn't say obviously, maybe nothing is obvious, but I think of critical importance is the basics, that whoever you select needs to be competent and capable. Right. They have to have experience. They need to know what they're doing. They need to be properly licensed for the advice that they're giving you. All of these basic, we'll call those sort of the basic core things.
Right.
But beyond that, so maybe in the analogy of dating, okay, so they need to be, available, not married already, and be looking to have some sort of a relationship. So there's the core stuff, but then there's so many more things. I think ultimately, once you know that, okay, if you're comparing 2 or 3, I would say probably interview 2 or 3 different people. And if they're all equal or pretty similar on the competency level, then you really need to find somebody that you feel you can show up and be listened to and really heard, because you're not just, I think, looking for someone to just tell you what to do. I have had clients that say, Sandra, just tell me what to do. Yeah. It's more than that. Yeah. The advice I give to clients, or what most advisors should be giving to clients, I believe it's tailored. It depends on your circumstances. Right. And some of that pulls from historical references that you bring forward around money. Yeah. Whether it was
have beliefs, right?
Financial scarcity, if you grew up and there wasn't a lot of money, that plays out in a very specific way as an adult.
Yes.
If you had more than enough money and things were given to you growing up, that plays out in a very important way. Yeah. If you've gone through a traumatic experience, I had a client who had gone through some fraud, an identity theft issue. financially was traumatizing for them and emotionally traumatizing for them. That plays out in a very specific way. So the way that I work with clients is making sure that I'm present and I'm listening to them and I'm hearing where they've come from to help me to guide them into the future. And I think that the personality is very, very important. Obviously, the competencies have to be there.
For sure.
And ideally, as I say, when you're interviewing and selecting the person that's a best fit, I think that personality is really important.
And you want that relationship, you want that trust, and it works both ways. I like that you say that it works both ways, because there may be not a fit on the other side. Right?
Well, that's very true.
Okay.
Absolutely. It does have to work both ways.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to somebody and you would expect a certain level of experience, but if you go to somebody and their practice is that if you have less than a certain amount, you don't get full access to them, or you only see them once a year, but your expectation is that it's quarterly, there's going to be a mismatch. And it's not that you're wrong or they're wrong. It's just that you're just not a good match.
So that would be one of the biggest tips. I don't know if that's the right word, but for anybody going forward and looking into this, make sure that you do your research, you do your, put some time into it. Don't just make that hasty decision. And for somebody that, people that are watching are all going to be in different levels isn't the right word, but some may be
different circumstances, different stages of this too.
Circumstances, that's a great word. So for them, this may be too big of a jump just to go right from
absolutely
to straight into an investment advisor. But can you give us some, I know that you had a couple of things, resources. So one for younger kids, if we're trying to help our kids, can you talk about that? And then the other book that you talked about, because like I said, we could talk forever, and
I know
we're out of time before we get those
that's right. This will be an 8-hour podcast today.
I could do that.
So yeah, thank you for prompting me to show these resources. So I love to read. And I will be honest, I get a lot of questions about, do you have a book that you can recommend that would explain this to me? Because I'm not quite ready to come in. I want to educate myself a little bit. So at least we're talking the same language, or I have some exposure to it. So I'm going to start on the first thing you talked about there about youth. Not that youth are coming in, teenagers are coming in to see me, but that is when we can have the biggest impact in changing the financial trajectory of someone's life. So I look at my children, I look at my friends' children, and I think, our job as parents, in my view only, is to launch these independent people, human beings, into the world so that they can survive on their own, always with mom ready to give them a big hug and a kiss. But they need to launch into the world being able to have some skill sets around cooking for themselves and doing their laundry and those sort of paying their bills is important as well. Terminology, it's really hard, first of all, to find a book for youth on financial literacy, especially in Canada. If you find one, it's most common to be from a US author. And then they're talking about concepts and types of plans that just aren't relevant. We don't have those types of things here.
Like you're talking like Wealthy Barber and...
Yeah, so Wealthy Barber is a Canadian one.
Oh, that one is, okay.
There's no slight against the Wealthy Barber. David Chilton is a brilliant author, and he's rewritten the book and relaunched it many years ago now. But
it is for older, though.
It is for a bit older. Now it's still, I would say, if there was somebody sort of in between where they're in their 20s and 30s, that is a great place to start. The reason I think for youth it might be a little bit advanced is it talks about things like mortgages and things like that, which is fine, great to prompt them to think about that. But there's not too many teenagers that are really concerned or thinking about mortgages.
Right.
Some are.
It's not relevant.
Not as relevant.
Yeah.
This book here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the screen, but it's called A Rich Future. It's written by, and it's called Essential Financial Concepts for Youth. And it's written by a young fellow named Noah Booth, who is a teenager still. He's still in high school. And it was when he was earlier in high school, around about grade 9, he got very interested. And I know he had a relationship with his grandma, his Nana, he calls her, would ask her questions and she'd share some information. He got more and more curious, and he tried to find some stuff to read. He couldn't find any books that were relevant for his age group or even anybody in high school. So his mom said, well, why don't you write a book? Okay. So long story short is, and it was a bit of a process for him, right? But he wrote this book, and he is fantastic. If anybody, I believe my contact information is maybe available to your listeners. If anyone is interested in this, I can send you a link to the book, but also an interview that one of my colleagues did with him. It's about a half an hour long, and I encourage anyone to have their kid sit down and watch it. And they talk about basic budgeting, goal setting. When you have your first job, you carve out a portion of it and put it away for the bigger goals, leaving yourself some to still have some fun. You want that special pair of Nike blazers that your mom won't buy you. Yes, I might be speaking from a personal example over the holidays. If they have their own money to spend, there's an important lesson in that as well. They really understand the value of money. So it's, yes, I need a phone, but do I need to have the latest, greatest iPhone? Would a earlier version be okay? Those sorts of things. So they're learning to set goals and do some financial planning. And it also talks about investment in here as well.
Love that.
Very good book for youth. The one that I think is really good for any of your listeners who are adults that are starting out. This one is now one of my very favorite books. It's written by Dominion Securities advisors, in fact. Yeah, and they're in the field, they're working with clients, and it's called, I'm going to read it here, A Life in Bloom. This is the favorite part of the title. It says, A Down-to-Earth Women's Guide to a Successful Financial Future. Well, if that doesn't hit the mark, I don't know what does.
No kidding.
Very good. Both of these books, this one is written by Nancy Ferran and Justin Dyer. Both of these books, and again, people can reach out to me. I can send them the specifics on how to get it, but they're both available on Amazon. They're both around about $20 to $25 if you want to get it in paperback, and well worth the read. Different audiences, but very, very good starting point if anybody's feeling a little on the fence about just jumping right in and meeting an advisor.
Right. And I think that's important. Also, we talked about researching an advisor. It's also nice for you to do some research yourself, educate yourself, so that you get used to a little bit of the terminology that they're using if you're brand new to it, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you're brand new to it, you may not be ready for the investment advisor. You got to come in with a bit of knowledge yourself, wouldn't you say? Like, because there's another level probably that they could go to first before they come to you.
I think so. I think that helps people to make the most out of their time with their advisor. The more that they can. Now, I don't want to impress anyone with the idea that they need to become an expert and be ready to do a quiz on all of the acronyms that we have in our industry. It's not about that. It's really just about opening your mind to some of the ideas. And it might, when I'm reading a book like that, I jot down questions, or I would recommend people jot down questions that you would ask an advisor. It will also help you in the process of interviewing someone, of knowing the things you want an advisor to be providing to you.
Yes.
Another good resource is watching for seminars that come on. Now, I know there's probably people from all over the place that watch your podcast and listen to this. So I can only speak for myself. I'm located in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. So this is maybe relevant to people in my area, but I'm sure there's these sorts of things around the country. But I put on a number of different seminars on topics, and I developed a 3-part financial literacy series. The first module is wealth planning basics. So we talk about some of the very basic terminology, financial planning concepts, goal setting, getting clarity, that sort of thing. The next session, the next module is called Improving Your Investment Intelligence, where we really dive into investing, asset. I don't want to throw out a bunch of jargon, but asset classes. And we talk about taxation of different investment income and that sort of thing. And then we get into, in module 3, it's advanced wealth planning strategies. So those are some that I've developed. They're just in-person sessions. So otherwise I'd say,
so I was going to say,
join in virtually.
Yeah. I'm like, do you do them on Zoom?
In person. I know, maybe one day. That's
yes.
yeah.
That would be awesome.
But around the country, there are other advisors that are putting on sessions and that are really, well, it sounds strange for the presenter to say it, but I think they're really worthwhile. And when I host them, and I host them usually 3 or 4 times a year, they're sold out. And that tells me there's an appetite for people that want to learn more. And it's so important.
And I think there's just something about taking some control in an area that you may feel you have no control over. And it can just be that little piece that you get, that little bit of, oh, I can do this. Like, it's not as hard and overwhelming as I'm making it out to be, because before we educate ourselves, things seem to become way bigger. And then when you just put some, you just narrow in a little bit and go, what's the first step I can do? I just need to take the first step. So
absolutely,
I'm going to have to wrap it up there.
Yes,
we are already out of time. But so I would say taking the first step of just coming in with an open mind, seeing the resources that are available to us, because it is everywhere. But I love what you recommended.
Well,
I love that you say, do your research. You're not just going to listen to anybody out there, because there's a lot of people giving not good information as well. So you need to really trust where you're coming from.
And I think it's important, just to, as a final point, just to what you said, is not being overwhelmed with the whole solution at once.
Yes.
If you think about your financial future like a big elephant, it seems really overwhelming if there's an elephant in the room. Elephant. How do you, there's a weird saying, but maybe you've heard of it before, but how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time.
Yes.
And not that I plan to eat an elephant, but really it's not worrying about, oh my God, it's a whole elephant, just one piece at a time. It's
I love that.
It's
keep it simple.
Keep it simple. One bite at a time.
One step at a time, one bite at a time. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here, Sandra. I just think, the knowledge and the wisdom that you have is just needed. There's so many of us that need this, and to have that conversation. And until next time, everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the replay. If you're here, stick around. We can ask Sandra some questions, and always know that you are more than enough as is. And these are all just tips to help us. So thank you, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.